Well, good day and welcome to another episode of the League of Biblical Enthusiasts. We continue our new series, Cities of the New Testament. In our last episode, we discussed boy Jesus in the temple and among the teachers in Jerusalem. We discussed the trip Jesus and his family made from Nazareth to Jerusalem, and the reason for their journey was to attend the Feast of the Passover. We learned about the Pharisees and Sadducees, two religious groups with whom Jesus likely met in the temple, and how they figured into the broader story that's told in the New Testament. Today we look at the village where Jesus grew up, Nazareth of Galilee. The word Nazareth appears 29 times in the New Testament, and the word Nazarene, meaning from Nazareth, 4 times. Jesus was known as Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus of Bethlehem, or Jesus of Capernaum, or Jesus of Bethsaida, or of Jerusalem, but simply as Jesus of Nazareth. So let's review some of the passages that refer to Nazareth before we take a deeper dive into the village itself. In Mark 1:19, we read, "And it came to pass in those days that Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized of John in the Jordan." In Luke 4:16, "And he, Jesus, came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read." In John chapter 1, Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. In John 18, on the night of Jesus' betrayal, "So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was about to happen, went out and asked them, 'Who is it you want?' 'Jesus of Nazareth,' they replied. 'I am he,' Jesus said." In Mark 14, when Jesus was being interrogated by the high priest, Peter was nearby in the courtyard. And a female servant noticed Peter and said to him, "You were also with the Nazarene, Jesus." Matthew 21, at the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Matthew says, "When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, 'Who is this?' The crowds answered, 'This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee.'" In John 19, at the crucifixion, Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross, and it read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Luke records in his Acts of the Apostles that the risen Jesus appeared to Saul on the Damascus road. And Saul said, "Who are you, Lord?" "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting." In life, in death, and beyond, Jesus was known then as he is now as Jesus of Nazareth. Nazareth in Galilee is where he spent his early years of boyhood and his early adulthood. Certainly the place where you grow up shapes you in some manner or fashion. It's where you went to school, where you made friends, spent time with family, you developed habits, you learned your language and your culture. And so it was with Jesus. So what can we learn about Nazareth in the time that Jesus lived there? This is the focus of this episode. However, since this episode and others in the series will include findings from archaeology, let's discuss for a moment the goals of archaeology as it relates to the Bible. And first, a disclaimer. The goal of archaeology of the Bible lands is not to, quote, prove the Bible, unquote. I'm not sure that can ever be done. Archaeology proceeds from an epistemologically neutral position regarding the beliefs of religion. For example, archaeology can demonstrate that the New Testament description of Jesus' burial in a rock-cut tomb is consistent with the burial practices of Jews in and around Jerusalem in the first century. The text fits the time and place, as archaeology has confirmed that it is consistent. But it cannot demonstrate that Jesus was physically resurrected from the tomb. How could it ever do so? To do that would involve reasoning from philosophy, history, science, and of course, it's based on your own presuppositions about what is physically possible in our universe. So, after all, what is this discipline called archaeology, and what would be a good working definition? Well, here's mine. Archaeology is the study of the material remains of the past that, with proper interpretation, helps us understand previous human behavior and cultures. Now, note that archaeology involves interpretation, as does all the soft sciences. Its findings cannot be reproduced in a laboratory. It's by nature a destructive enterprise. It is not a hard science like chemistry or physics. The results of archaeology can shed light on an ancient cultural belief or practice. It can illustrate the text in a way that just reading the text cannot do. For example, in Mark chapter 12, the Pharisees and Herodians engaged Jesus in a discussion about paying taxes to Caesar. And Jesus said, "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." They brought the coin, and he asked them, "Whose image is this, and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. We can only imagine what that coin would have looked like and felt like in his hands, its size, its shape, color, and weights. But if we found a real denarius that dates to the time and place in which Jesus lived, this would be actual confirmation of the existence of that type of coin. In fact, we do have such confirmation. Many thousands of denarii have been unearthed over the centuries by archaeologists. Here is but one example of a Roman denarius dated to the time of their emperor Tiberius, who happened to be the emperor who reigned during the adult lifetime of Jesus. And this is what archaeology does best. It illustrates the text. It can confirm or disconfirm the text. Archaeology can confirm the existence of places, topographical data, people, and events mentioned in texts such as the Bible. It can provide helpful information for its historical context, but it does not, and I don't see how it ever could, provide definitive proof of the divine inspiration or the accuracy of its theological interpretations. This demands a much wider scope of investigation. Archaeology can provide evidence that the text is consistent with what the archaeological record tells us, or not. So, what about the town of Nazareth, our subject for today? Let's work backwards from the present to find out what first century Nazareth was like. And here are some paintings and photographs of Nazareth from the past couple of centuries showing its growth. Today, in April 2025, Nazareth is a city of some 81,000 people, mostly Muslim, but with a large Christian presence. The city itself is densely packed, and that makes it difficult to engage in large or even moderate style excavations. The three main archaeologists who have excavated in Nazareth in recent times would be Bellarmino Bagatti, Yardena Alexandri, and Ken Dark. Ken Dark's work is extensive, and here's a picture of two of his books describing his conclusions after extensive field work in Nazareth. The general picture of first century Nazareth we get from archaeological work looks something like this. Nazareth was a conservative Jewish village with maybe 500 or so people, with perhaps 50 houses. It's possible it had a population a little larger, maybe up to 1,000. We just don't know the precise number, but it was a village, not a large city. There were many rock-cut tombs in the area around Nazareth. These tomb complexes were generally carved into a rock face. They have niches for burials and are closed with a stone slab. And these are called kokim tombs. The presence of limestone vessel fragments of the type characteristic of the early Roman period Jewish communities in Galilee suggests the settlement was culturally Jewish. It appears to have been an agricultural community with the population following a strict interpretation of Second Temple Judaism. The settlement is associated with stone quarries, as were those in the valley between Nazareth and nearby Sepphoris. And the number of quarries close to Nazareth suggests this might have been an unusually important characteristic of the local economy. In Dr. Alexandre's work, several fragments of chalk vessels were found, which were only used by Jews in this period because such vessels were not susceptible to becoming ritually unclean. A first-century Roman coin was also found at the site. Dr. Ken Dark explains the importance of field walking around the city. In the first century, there was another settlement called Sepphoris, 4 miles north of Nazareth, and the area between them was ideal for field walking and observing the remains. The results were rewarding. Towards Sepphoris, there was a lot of Roman-style pottery, but closer you moved toward Nazareth, it died out. It seems that communities closer to Nazareth observed Jewish purity laws and were deliberately avoiding the impure Roman-style pottery. In other words, Jesus was brought up in a settlement that was conspicuously conservative Jewish, rejecting any Roman influence, even pottery. Hints of glassworking and evidence of weaving cloth have also been found in ancient Nazareth. There was a water source nearby, and today it's known by the name Mary Spring, and here is an old picture of it. Interestingly, in recent times, 2 first-century Roman period houses have been discovered in Nazareth, one found near the Church of the Annunciation and another underneath the Sisters of Nazareth convent. The house under the convent is believed by some to be the childhood home of Jesus. But as of yet, no evidence of an inscription with the words Yeshua was here had been found. A few days ago, I watched a YouTube video in which an enthusiastic Christian tour guide said an ossuary was found in the house with the inscription, Joseph, father of Jesus. This is not true. No such ossuary has been found there. So don't just believe everything you read or hear or see on YouTube videos, even this one. Ask for evidence and seek to verify. Nonetheless, the 2 houses are significant for the understanding of domestic life in first-century Nazareth. The house near the Church of the Annunciation is considered a significant find and offers insights into the daily life of people in Nazareth during the time of Jesus. In 3 short seasons, in 2009 and 2011, a small-scale archaeological excavation was carried out next to the Franciscan Church of the Annunciation compound in Nazareth and was directed by Yardena Alexandre. I provided a link to her findings in a report she provided. It's in the description box below. Among other things discovered in the house, Dr. Alexandre's work yielded a spindle whorl used for spinning thread, and other artifacts such as broken cooking pots and limestone vessels. To me, the most interesting house is the one studied by Dr. Ken Dark that was found under the Sisters of Nazareth convent. Dr. Dark's work revealed a rock-cut dwelling with features dating to the early Roman period. The archaeological site under the Sisters of Nazareth convent was first discovered accidentally in 1884. Following the initial finding, the site underwent informal investigations for several decades by different workmen, nuns, and clergy. The French nuns who established the convent in the mid-19th century made various archaeological discoveries during the construction and development of the convent. These early investigations, including those conducted over 20 years by the nuns themselves, revealed a substantial set of interconnecting semi-subterranean structures, including what appeared to be rooms or caves, graves, and cisterns. The nuns kept notebooks of their discoveries and even arranged some small finds in a museum. Despite the extensive early work, the site remained largely unpublished and unknown to scholarship until Dr. Ken Dark led the Nazareth Archaeological Project, which he began in 2006. Dr. Dark conducted a re-examination using 21st century archaeological methods. He collated, he copied, he reanalyzed all the records of previous investigations and conducted new archaeological surveys. He determined that the partially rock-cut structure was actually a 1st century AD domestic house, possibly a courtyard house. This considered the first surface-built domestic structure of this date from Nazareth. The house included semi-basement rooms carved into the soft Nazareth rock and contained rock foundation courses for stone walls and underground pits covered by stone lids, likely used for storage, or cisterns. Artifacts found within and around this dwelling, such as pottery and limestone vessels, suggest it was inhabited by a low-status but not impoverished Jewish family in the 1st century. While it is impossible, of course, to definitively label this as Jesus' childhood home, its characteristics align what is expected of a typical dwelling in Nazareth during that period. I visited Nazareth myself in 2018 and walked through Nazareth Village, which is a reconstruction of what life was like for Jewish families in the early 1st century. I took many pictures and wanted to share them with you, so here you go. While viewing these pictures, I like to think of Jesus growing up here, working alongside his father, assisting his mother with chores, perhaps gardening, cooking, drawing water for the family, caring for animals, playing with neighborhood friends, listening to stories around a fire, and all the things that growing boys do. While we cannot, of course, with certainty say that either of these two homes were the house where Jesus grew up in, it is fair to say that what has been discovered is entirely consistent with what we already know about domestic life at that time and place. And yes, Luke says that Jesus went to the synagogue in Nazareth and read from the Bible there. However, to date, no synagogue has been found in Nazareth. As we noted earlier, modern-day Nazareth is a very dense, very busy place that discourages even moderate-sized excavations. Now, when Philip told Nathanael they had found the Messiah, Nathanael said, "Nazareth, can any good thing come from here?" Now, this statement is also entirely consistent with the village being an inconspicuous backwater place where nobody ever expected it would produce someone of renown, let alone the founder of a religion claimed by 3 billion or so people. There's another incident described by Luke in chapter 4. After Jesus preached a challenging message in the synagogue in Nazareth, Luke writes, "All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up, drove him out of the town, took him to the brow of the hill on which the town was built in order to throw him off the cliff." Some have commented that no such hill exists in Nazareth and that this story is pure fiction. But there is a 1,300-foot tall hill today called Mount Precipice, just 2 miles outside the city. Even if Mount Precipice is not the hill described in the scriptures, the area in and around Nazareth is still rugged and has many cliffs with a 50-foot plus drop. Quite frankly, I see no issue with the historicity of the story. Now, we cannot leave this episode without a short description of the so-called Nazareth Inscription. So here's a summary of the story, and I'm leaving out many details, but full accounts of this incident or this stone slab that has been found will be found in the description box below. In 1878, an eccentric antiquities collector named Wilhelm Fröner, a former curator at the Louvre, acquired a 2-foot tall white marble tablet that has a 22-line Greek inscription. He kept it in his private collection of over 3,000 objects until his death. He left behind a cryptic note that read, "This marble was sent from Nazareth in 1878. It is not clear whether the stone was simply found in Nazareth and shipped to Paris, or whether it was brought to Nazareth from another site. This ambiguity of provenance has caused doubts regarding the authenticity of the stone, and this is closely related to its dating. Based on epigraphy, the stone has been dated to the first half of the 1st century AD, although a few scholars have dated it later, maybe 50 or 100 years later. Now, this marble stone might be the oldest surviving artifact of Christianity. Wilhelm Fröner never mentioned the object to another soul, as far as we know. He did not display it to friends. He never tried to sell it, nor are there any signs he felt an obligation to bring it to the attention of scholars. It is inconceivable that a man of his training and experience could fail to recognize the value of this object that he alone possessed. It was his secret for nearly 50 years. After his death in 1925, the Fröner collection was acquired by the Paris National Library, where the Nazareth inscription was rediscovered and came to the attention of the French scholar Franz Cumont. In 1930, Cumont published a Greek transcription and a translation with a commentary and published it in an article for the French journal Historical Review. Now, what on earth did this inscription say that has made such an object of controversy over the years? In short, the stone's inscription contains an edict from an unnamed Caesar prohibiting desecration of tombs. Those found guilty were subject to capital punishment. The edict suggests to some biblical scholars that the tablet represented the Roman emperor's reaction to the news that Jesus' body was missing from his tomb. Franz Cumont proposed that it was connected to Jesus' disappearance, and he was convinced it was authentic. This inscription took the scholarly world by storm because it can be read as an imperial edict against the disciples stealing Jesus' body from his tomb and faking his resurrection. I'll read to you a recent translation from Clyde Billington. The inscription reads, "Edict of Caesar. It is my decision concerning graves and tombs. Whoever has made them for the religious observance of parents or children or household members, that these remained undisturbed forever. But if anyone legally charges that another person has destroyed and has in any manner extracted those who have been buried, or has moved with wicked intent those who have been buried to other places, committing a crime against them, or has moved sepulchre sealing stones against such a person, I order that a judicial tribunal be created, just as it is done concerning the gods and human religious observances. Even more so, it would be obligatory to treat with honor those who have been entombed. You are absolutely not to allow anyone to move those who have been entombed. But if someone does, I wish that violator to suffer capital punishment under the title of tomb breaker." In Matthew 28, the chief priest devised a scheme to explain why Jesus' body was missing from the tomb. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, Matthew says, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep." Now, it is easy to see why this ties in with the Nazareth inscription. Some see it as a direct warning to Christians from the emperor not to tamper with tombs like they were accused of doing in Jerusalem. In this view, the emperor who proclaimed the edict was Claudius, who reigned as emperor from AD 41 to 54. But then, in the year 2020, a scientific team organized by Kyle Harper of the University of Oklahoma performed an isotope study of the marble and published their findings in the Journal of Archaeological Science. The team analyzed 2 small samples of marble powder drilled from the back of the inscription. An unusual chemical composition was identified, and the geochemical makeup most closely matched a marble quarry on the Greek island of Kos. The team proposed that the edict was issued by Augustus after the desecration of the tomb of one of the kings of Kos named Nicias, a tyrant who ruled Kos from 50 to 20 BCE. After his death, the poet Cranagarus wrote that Nicias' tomb was desecrated by the people. So, which is it? Is the Nazareth inscription an edict that stemmed from the controversy surrounding the empty tomb of Jesus? Or is it to prohibit tomb desecration of a king on the island of Kos? Or is it a complete forgery made to entice eager collectors in the late 19th century? Personally, I'm undecided. I will admit it's very tempting to see it in the context of the first century Jesus movement. But its lack of verified provenance is a major problem. Perhaps in later times, we'll have a clearer understanding of the details of this marble stone, its edict, and why and to whom it was directed. In the meantime, it remains a fascinating inscription that no doubt will continue to be studied again and again in the coming years, and so it should. So let's wrap up. I encourage you to go back and read the New Testament and what it has to say about Jesus of Nazareth. Maybe you'll be inspired to study more about this one unknown village that everyone knows now. If you like our content, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. In our next episode, we will look at yet another city featuring Jesus and his ministry. Let me know your thoughts on this episode or on the series in general. And be sure to follow up the resources I've left in the description box. There are many, lots to go through there. It will occupy your time for hours on end if you choose to follow those up. Until then, be well and stay tuned for our next episode in the series, Cities of the New Testament. Coming to you soon by none other than the League of Biblical Enthusiasts.